So we're back dealing with the DRA. This is going to be her fourth visit with us. We're going to test the DRA, see where she's at. When she started with us 4 visits ago, the first measurement was 3.5. Above the belly button, at the belly button or the umbilicus, it was a 3.5. And then below the umbilicus or the belly button, it was a 3.5. So she was consistent at a 3.5, 3.5, and 3.5. At our last session, at the end of the last session, it was 2 finger width split above the belly button. At the belly button was a 1 finger width split, and that's pretty normal. I mean, the umbilical cord was here, and so we typically find that it stays at about a 1 finger width split. So for me, as long as that has stayed, this is pretty much resolved now. Below the belly button, the 3.5 had went to a 0.5, right? I would love to see that go to a 0 in this session. I don't know if it has or it hasn't, but these are the 2 we're kind of left with as long as this is resolved and hasn't kind of come back open, right? So we're going to go ahead and measure this. So again, the way I measure it, you can go anywhere from the xiphoid process to the umbilicus to get this first measurement. For me, I usually find, especially for women that have had children, it's usually around the belly button. So I try to stay a little bit closer to that. So again, my ring finger is in the umbilicus, and where my index finger comes is going to be my first testing spot on her. Okay, and I bring my fingers around so they're horizontal, and then go ahead and lift your head up for me. Yep, that's still a 2. Okay, go back down. I have an idea of what's going on there, and we'll talk about that on her next session. Okay, so that's still a 2. It didn't get any better, didn't get any worse. It's still a 2. Here at the umbilicus, go ahead and lift your head up for me. That's pretty good. That's at a 1, maybe a 1.5. Might have come open a little bit. Come back up again. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's a 1. Come on back down. Sometimes if you don't have your patients raise their head up enough, it doesn't engage the rectus abdominis bellies enough to really get a good contraction, and so the split will look a little bit bigger. So it's still at a 1 whenever those rectus bellies were actually contracted. So this looks pretty good to me. Below the belly button here, again, index finger in the belly button, where my ring finger comes, that's going to be my next testing spot. Okay, go ahead and lift up for me. Yeah, that's gone. So there's nothing there, okay? There's no divot whatsoever. So that's went from a 0.5 to a 0. Come on back down. So this is resolved. This for me is resolved because it's at a 1. So 0, 1. We're still at a 2 up here. Since this is our 4th visit, I'm going to stick with treating the jejunum ileum because that's kind of what we have found. 4 sessions of treating the jejunum ileum. It will maintain whatever we've gained here. As you can see, this has gotten better since the last time. So again, treatments continue when your patients or clients have already left. So the healing really happens kind of off the table, which is great and wonderful. So this is good. This is good. We're still dealing with this up here. Again, we're going to work with the jejunum ileum. So I'm going to go through that today. However, if you stick with this series, she's going to come back in 3 weeks, and we're going to do something entirely different for this spot up here that we're kind of figuring out. There's another piece of anatomy that we think is responsible for this. So stay tuned for that. My guess is after I treat the jejunum ileum today, this is probably still going to be at a 2. That's my prediction, but we're going to give it a try and see if we can get it to resolve a little bit. But let's not be shocked if it does not. All right, so we're going to go to the root of the jejunum ileum. So remember the root of the jejunum ileum goes from DJ, okay, which is on a line from the umbilicus to about her left mid-clavicle. So left mid-clavicle down to the umbilicus line, and a couple centimeters up on that line is DJ. And then the other border is going to be the ileocecal valve. So the ileocecal valve is from her right ASIS, which is this bone right here, to the belly button. So on that line, about a third from the ASIS or a half on that line, and about 2 centimeters up, give or take. So these are like lateral borders, right, of the root. So the root is going to run in between these 2 lines, and it's going to run like this. It's on a little bit of an angle, okay? So we have the superior aspect of the root that's above the umbilicus. We're going to have the inferior aspect of the root of the jejunum ileum that is inferior. So superior and inferior. So we're going to do that first. So again, just to remind you guys, we're going to start over just superior to DJ here. Sides of my thumbs are going to sink in, just like that. Do me a favor, bend your knees for me. There you go. If she bends her knees, that'll just give me a little bit of slack, and I don't have to fight her abs so much. I'm going to sink in until I feel some tension, which is right there for her. And then I'm going to slide my thumbs down until I hit like a speed bump. That's the root. So I just hit it right there. There's some tension. And then I'm going to scoop it towards the ceiling. Okay, so a little bit of a scoop. So we load perpendicular and we scoop anterior. So it's like we're trying to pluck that root up off the back wall of the posterior parietal peritoneum. So I'm going to try to find the tightest spot on the superior aspect of this root. So we're going to test that spot and then move over. This is our second spot, same test. That one's a little tighter than the first one. Third, that's getting looser as we get over towards the ileocecal valve. Okay, so we're going to come back up. And there's two spots right here. That one and that one. That actually might be a little... nope, I changed my mind. Right here. Pretty much midline above her umbilicus. This is her tightest spot right there. Okay, so now I'm going to keep my thumbs there. I'm going to reach over her belly button with one finger from each hand, making sure that I don't go to the left or lateral to DJ. So this DJ line here, remember there's no root to the left of that. So each finger, one finger from each hand, doesn't matter which fingers you use, are going to sink in until I feel a little tension, and then slide up to me until I feel that speed bump, okay, which is right there for her. That's the inferior root. And then I'm going to pluck it up towards the ceiling. So go scooping it anterior. How tight is that spot? Move one finger over, move the other finger over, sink in, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. That spot's a little tighter than the first one. Move over again. This is our third spot. Actually, that's the tightest one so far. I'm going to move over. I'm kind of working my way over to the ileocecal valve here. Remember, that's our lateral border. It's getting a little looser as we go over there. So for me, her tightest spot below the belly button is below it and a little bit off to her right, just a smidge. Okay, whereas on the superior side, it's right above the umbilicus or the belly button. So we're going to treat that superior aspect of the root first. So under my thumbs, go ahead and bend your elbow for me. There we go. Let's keep it down just for a second. Yep, you're doing great. So here we go. With our thumbs, we're going to sink in until I feel tension. Load perpendicular to the root. There's the root. I feel tension. I scoop it anterior. Go ahead and move that arm up. Got a little gurgle. Keep going. Keep going. Right there. Hang right there. That's where I feel tension under my thumbs. The release feels like my thumbs are sliding back and forth. It's literally the root that's sliding kind of basically from DJ to ileocecal valve. Right? It's sliding back and forth, back and forth. I know the treatment's done when there's no more movement. So go ahead and bring that arm down, but you can keep it bent. And then we come back in and we can retest that spot. Should be a little looser than it was a minute ago, and it is, which is great. And then we can do this again. So we sink in with our thumbs, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. Go ahead and bring that arm up. Right there, hang right there, yep. And then the sliding back and forth, it's kind of shearing to the right, shearing to the left, shearing to the right, shearing to the left. Right there it stops, and then back down. Usually as we keep going, the release gets faster and faster. Okay, so last one, sink in, load perpendicular to the root, scoop anterior. Go ahead and come on up with the arm. Right there. Also, as it releases, you'll find that whether they use their arm or their head or the left arm, doesn't really matter as long as it's something above where my thumbs are at. Every time it releases, the arm or the neck or whatever can go further and further before you feel tension. Go ahead and come on back. There we go. And then if we retest that, it's just a lot looser than it was a second ago. And I'm getting all kinds of gurgling, which is a good sign as well. All right, now, down on the inferior aspect of the root, I think my fingers may have slid a little bit, so I just want to retest this spot. And that, yeah, I slid over a little bit. Okay, so it's a little bit to the right of the umbilicus and below it. Okay, so right there where my fingers are at. So my fingers, I have one finger from each hand. It's going to sink down until I feel tension, and then slide up and hit that root. So load the root perpendicular and scoop it anterior towards the ceiling. Go ahead and do an anterior pelvic tilt. Beautiful, right there. And then take your knees to the left slowly. Right there. Hang right there for me. There we go. And now my fingers are sliding to the right and to the left, to the right and to the left. My load is still scooping perpendicular, or loading perpendicular and scooping anterior. Okay. But the release is the shearing. And right there she stops. Go ahead and relax everything. And then we can retest. You always retest. Is it looser than it was a second ago? And it is. Okay. And then we're going to go again. Sink in. Load perpendicular. Scoop anterior. I'm going to go with the anterior pelvic tilt again. Go ahead. Yeah, great. And then take your legs to the right. Let me just see. Nope. Come on back. Go to the left. Right there. Good. And again, the shearing is happening. Again, my load is perpendicular and scooping anterior. I keep that load through this whole thing until the shearing is done, and then go ahead and relax into that. Very good. Nice. This has really changed for her, this inferior aspect over these treatments. This is just so much better. Before, I could just feel a straight line down to her suprapubic scar. It's feeling much better than it has. All right, we're going to do it one more time, sinking in, loading perpendicular, scooping anterior. Go ahead and do that anterior pelvic tilt again. Good. Take those knees to the left. That seems to be working for us. Keep going. Right there's tension. Stop right there. And here comes the shearing to the left, shearing to the right, shearing to the left, shearing to the right, and she's done. And then go ahead and come on back. Good. Now, for these two spots, so we put our thumb back where we were, fingers right where we're at, so it's a little off of midline. We sink our thumbs and our fingers straight down towards the table until we feel some tension. And then we bring our thumbs and fingers towards each other until we feel tension. And a tiny little scoop up towards the ceiling. Not too much, just a little bit. And the release will feel like your fingers go one way and your thumbs go the other way. It's really the root that's shearing, but that's what you'll feel. This release is really fast, and we're done. Okay, it's a nice little finisher to do that. Okay, so that's the root, right? Now, from there, we're going to go on and do the loops. So loop to loop. So go ahead and straighten your legs out for me for a second. The way we figure out which loops are restricted, remember a loop could be restricted to another loop, is we use motility. And motility is very, very light, and the feeling is going to be like a fan kind of opening up and to the left and anterior, and then closing down into the right and posterior. This is what it's going to feel like. And there's going to be a spot where there's no movement. So it'll feel like the fan moves, and then it gets stuck, and then it moves. And then when it comes back, it moves, and then it gets stuck, and then it moves. Okay, so that place where it gets stuck and we don't feel any movement under our thumbs or our fingers, that's where the loops are going to be restricted. Super light hands. Okay, so what I feel a lot of motion down in here, and I actually feel a lot of motion over here. So there's a section right here, I don't feel so much motion. I'm right-handed, so I'm just going to use my right hand and only pay attention to this. And now I'm trying to figure out, between fingers and thumbs, where do I feel a lot of motion as that fan is kind of opening and closing underneath my hand here. Feel a lot in this thumb, feel a lot in this finger. So now I'm down to these three. Right here. I'm just going to test that, make sure I'm right on that. Yeah, it's right there. So I don't really feel anything moving right here. Go ahead and bend your knees for me again. So anytime you want to do a treatment where you have to sink in the body, you kind of have to have the knees bent in one way or another so that you don't fight the abs. All right, so 1 to 2 fingers on that spot that we felt no movement in. And then we're going to sink down to these loops. So I'm just going to sink down until I feel a little bit of tension, which is right there. And as I slowly let go, it's going to move over to the loop it's restricted with. So here we go. Yep, it's right over here. So I felt my fingers drift right over to the spot. Okay, so now I'm going to put my fingers from my other hand there. And we're going to sink in with both sets of fingers, right hand and left, till I feel tension. I'm going to drift off just a little bit so her loops can move, and here we go. My right hand is doing a counterclockwise rotation, while my left hand is doing a clockwise rotation. That's her release. My pressure is just to the table, and that's it. And now she just reversed, so my right hand is going clockwise, while my left hand is going counterclockwise, and there she stopped. I remove my left hand. My right hand is the original hand that's on the loops that weren't moving. Take the pressure off, I give it a second or two, and then I retest. So I bring those loops down to the table, and I drift off, and I figure out, is it still restricted? Yep, it is. It drifted right over, it got pulled right over to the same spot, so we weren't done. So, fingers for my left hand there. We're going to sink in. I feel tension, which is right there. Take a little pressure off so they can move, otherwise you're not going to have any movement. And my left hand is doing a clockwise motion when my right hand does a counterclockwise motion. That's her release. My pressure's to the table. And now they just reverse. Right hand is doing clockwise, left hand is doing counterclockwise. Oh, that's good. All right, so my left hand just sheared over to her left hip a little bit, and my right hand sheared over towards me, towards her right. So they separated a little bit, which is usually a good sign. That's what we want. So I have a feeling I might be done here, but we'll see. So I remove my left hand. My right hand's still in the original loops. I give it a break, meaning I take the pressure off. And then I sink back in. Little tension here. I drift off. There we go. So what happens now is instead of the loop getting pulled over to here, it's literally just popping straight up to the ceiling, which is what I want. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that's done. I want to check. I'm going to check motility and just make sure that that fan is kind of moving, meaning the loops are moving, underneath my hand, which they are. Okay, so that pretty much tells me I'm done with the loops. So we've done the root, we've done the superior aspect and the inferior aspect. We've done loop-to-loop restrictions. And now we're going to do loop-to-root restrictions, or what we call the mesentery. Remember, the mesentery is a sling that goes from the root, and it kind of slings around the small intestines. And so we're going to be working between our two hands. And so you want to think of like some material, a sling through there. So the way we want to figure out where that restriction is at is we're going to use the inferior aspect of the root. Sometimes you can use the superior and inferior together. I don't like doing that because I think sometimes we can get too pinchy if we do that. So the inferior one works just fine, and you'll be safe utilizing that. So we're going to find the most restricted spot on the inferior aspect of the root. It's probably going to be the same spot that we had earlier, but we'll retest. So we sink in, load perpendicular to the root, scoop anterior, just like we did earlier. Head it across. Testing multiple spots. Yeah, it's the same spot. Okay, so it's the same spot. It's inferior and to the right of the belly button. So again, to test this, the fingers sink in, load perpendicular to the root, scoop anterior. You move over to another spot, sink in, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. Keep moving over until you're pretty close to that ileocecal valve. Okay, she gets looser and looser as she gets closer to the ileocecal valve. Her spot is right underneath my right finger there, to be very, very specific. So I'm going to put my left middle finger on that. And then as I engage the root up, if you think of like an apron, like a sling coming off of that, you're going to sometimes you can see it on her. You can see it a little bit as I sink in, load perpendicular, scoop anterior. You can almost see that line. Okay, so she's got a restriction here. Not everybody gets that line. Okay, so if you have somebody that doesn't get the line, the way you can figure out where the restriction is, your right finger pads will sink in, and you'll say, "Hey, am I on the same tissue or not?" And then you move over. It's getting a little tighter. And then right there, I feel very connected between my fingers on my left hand and my fingers on my right hand. If I keep moving over, I'm not connected, I'm not connected, I'm not connected. So if I come back and it's right on the line, there I feel connected. Okay? Still feel connected. It just feels like a cord almost. because there's a restriction in it. And I keep working my way down until I fall off of it, right below her suprapubic scar here. I fall off of it. It's literally on her scar here, like right on the scar. And this is pretty common for a suprapubic scar when the body heals, you know, for things to kind of get restricted in it. So I'm going to leave my middle finger of my right hand on that scar, which is the end of the line, which means there's a loop here. Okay, so there's a loop of the jejunum ileum and the small intestines here. And then I'm on the root of the jejunum ileum or the small intestine here. And I'm working in between the loop and the root. So this is where the work is really happening. And the way we're going to do this is this. My root hand, my left hand, is going to sink in. I'm just using one finger. Sink in, load perpendicular to the root, scoop it anterior. My right hand is going to treat this like a loop because that's what I'm on, meaning I'm going to sink my right middle finger down towards the table and then drift off just a smidge so that it can move. And here we go. So the loop, my right hand is moving to her left hip. The root under my left hand is moving towards me. And now the root is shearing towards her left side, and the loop is shearing towards me. And there's a lot of bubbling and gurgling under my left palm, actually, which is usually a good sign. Something's changing, something's moving. Now the root is going to the left. The loop is doing a counterclockwise motion, so it just changed a little bit on me. And right there, everything stopped. So now I relax. Okay. I take the pressure off, but I keep my position, and we do it again. So the root finger, middle finger in the left hand, sinks in, loads perpendicular, scoops anterior. My right middle finger here is going to move around to make sure I'm at the tail end of that tension line, making sure I'm right on that loop because it changes a little bit. And I'm going to sink my middle finger from my right hand down towards the table and then drift off just a little bit. Okay, so I've engaged the root, I've engaged the loop, I'm working on the mesentery in between. The root is shearing to me, the loop is doing a counterclockwise motion. This is how she's releasing. And now the loop is doing clockwise, and the root is literally very tiny shears back and forth, left and right, left and right, left and right. Now, something different just happened there, which is, I think, is a good sign. My right hand moved down towards her pubic bone, meaning my right hand moved away from my left hand, which means if you think of this as like an apron in between or a sling, and it was in a knot, and the knot released, you would get a lengthening, right? So the loop would move away from the root. So I have a feeling we're done, but I'll give it a break, and then we'll try one more time just to make sure. But I think that might have been it right there. So we'll go one more time. Left hand, middle finger sinks in, loads perpendicular, scoops anterior. Right hand, middle finger, sinks down towards the table, drifts off just a little bit so it can move. Yeah, nothing's happening, okay? For it to have nothing happening, it's basically saying, yeah, no, you've already released this. There's like nothing else to do. Okay, there's nothing else to do. Again, if on that second time that we did that, that didn't completely release, you would do it again. It's kind of like the rules of 3 in the visceral manipulation. So that's kind of the max that we would do that is 3 times. Okay, she only really needed 2. On the third one, nothing really happened with that. So then we're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit of motility. Right? A little bit of motility. So again, our hands kind of spaced like this, taking up as much real estate as possible. Remember the fan kind of opening and closing. We're going to see which way it likes to go, either opening or closing, right? Or what we call in-spear and ex-spear in the Brawl Institute in the visceral manipulation world. And we're going to induce, meaning we're going to encourage into ease, whichever way it likes to go, so that it has more motion in the direction it doesn't like to go when we're done. Okay, so it's almost like very gently pushing a kid on a swing in one direction, and if you get out of the way, and when they swing back, they obviously go further in the opposite direction. So that's kind of what we're doing. It's very subtle. It's energetic. My hands are very light. It's about a 5 nickel pressure, meaning if I put 5 nickels on her abdomen, that's what she would feel. So here we go. The fan is opening, meaning she's going into in-spear right now. So up and to the left and anterior. And then here comes ex-spear, meaning down and to the right and posterior. Her motility, since we've started, 4 sessions ago, really has improved significantly. So it's actually pretty good. I'm going to try to see if I can figure out which way she's still kind of struggling a little bit. Yeah. So she likes inspire a little bit more, meaning the fan opening up and to the left, and so we're going to encourage that. Now when you do this, it's almost like when your kid was learning how to ride a bicycle and you were behind them. You don't want to overpower them, right? You don't want to push them, but you kind of want to help them a little bit. So you kind of nudge them, right, in the direction they want to go because they're steering. So right now, her small intestine, her jejunum ileum, is steering, and I'm kind of behind it. I'm not taking it over. I'm just kind of nudging it in the direction it's wanting to go, okay, which is the fan opening. When it comes back down and the fan is closing into expire, I'm just monitoring that. Okay, I'm monitoring what we just gained. I don't do anything until it flips back over to the fan opening or into inspire, and then I encourage, but I stay behind the motion. Okay, encourage, but stay behind the motion, meaning I'm letting it lead, but I'm just kind of encouraging it to go a little bit further. And then here it comes back into expire, meaning the fan closing and going posterior. So much better. I'm going to do a couple more of these because I know for those of you watching, it's like watching paint dry right now. We're just going to do a few more. Call this an induction whenever we encourage this in the direction of ease, which way it likes to go. One more here into inspire, which is an opening up of the fan, up and to the left and a little bit forward. And here it starts the fans closing, back into expire, down into the right and posterior. And now I'm just going to monitor, meaning I'm not doing anything. I'm just kind of along for the ride. And I'm assessing, what did we just gain with that? Inspire feels pretty good. Expire feels pretty good. There's still a tiny little hesitation where she flips from expire back to inspire, meaning closing into opening. So there's still doesn't quite have this full motion yet, but it's really, really close. Okay. All right, so we're going to come back and test. Again, I'll be surprised if this is closed. If it does, fabulous, wonderful. If it doesn't, we'll talk about what we're going to do next time. It's a little teaser for you guys. All right, so we're going to test the first spot. Remember that went from a 3.5 finger width to a 2. So at the beginning of this session, it was at 2. So again, right ring finger in the belly button. Where my index finger comes, that's going to be my first measurement spot. Go ahead and raise up. It's a tight 2. It actually feels like it closed a little bit. It's super shallow, right? So it's a tight 2. Go ahead and come back down. What's interesting to me, I don't know if you saw, my camera person saw that or not, it's almost like this muscle belly is like pulled off to the side a little bit more than this one. So the split to me wasn't based completely in the middle when she raised up. It was a little bit off to the right. So there's something over here, and we'll talk about that in a minute, what we're going to do next time, what we think is happening. So we're going to come down to the belly button and retest. Again, this was kind of a 1 earlier, so come on up. Yeah, it's still, you guys can see that, right? It's a nice 1 right there. Okay, so that's normal. Go ahead and come back down. Her rectus is really strong, which is great. That's wonderful. And then here's our next spot. Remember, index finger in the belly button. Again, where my ring finger comes. I just do this because it just keeps me in the same spot. Go ahead and come back up. Nice. And there's just nothing there, guys. Nothing. So that went from a 0.5 to a 0. So 0, 1, and we're at a 2. So here's the teaser for next time, guys. So we did 4 treatments of the jejunum ileum. For a lot of our patients and clients, that literally closes everything up for us. We are finding here at this clinic that if this top section doesn't close up, and for those of you that are treating men, we find this to be the biggest opening for men. I don't know why. I haven't figured that out yet. For women, it's usually down a little bit further that it is the bigger openings. But for this top section, what we're finding is it's the first leg of the duodenum, which is the tube right after the stomach. And its connections where it comes through the posterior parietal peritoneum mean the back of the balloon. Remember, the balloon kind of comes around and it thickens up and becomes that root of the jejunum ileum, right? And then it continues on as the mesentery and wraps around the loops. So even when we worked the jejunum, ileum, or the small intestines, we were really working the back of the balloon. So this duodenum, and I'll bring in some props next time to show you what we think is happening here. This duodenum has a spot where the first leg of it actually sticks into the balloon a little bit. So there's part of that back of that balloon, little opening back there, that we think there's a little bit of a restriction on the underside of the tube here. So again, remember, your stomach is going to be right here, and then the duodenum is the next tube in line. And so again, if you can come back for session 5, we're going to see if that will close that up if we treat the first leg of the duodenum.